Okay, we're going to go ahead and start. Some of this will just be intro, and we'll get into the meat of the discussion soon. So, good morning. My name is Hugo. I'm the Chief Strategic Partnerships Officer for Travis Manion Foundation and the Chairman of the Delaware Valley Veterans Consortium. I'm a retired Army Lieutenant Colonel. And I served in Afghanistan. So this session is extremely personally important to me. This is our third virtual Veterans Town Hall. And in the new environment of Zoom and with COVID, if any of you have been a member of DVVC for a while, we used to do quarterly meetings in person, but now we have switched to virtual, and we've added the town hall aspect to deal with extremely pertinent issues. So one of them was COVID, another one it was LGBTQ+, and now we're dealing with the fallout from Afghanistan. So DVVC is the area's Community Veteran Engagement Board, or CVEB, whose mission it is to unite military and veteran service organizations and advocates who share common goals to build programmatic capacity and increase services to clients under the umbrella of regional collaboration. This town hall is designed to share information and provide resources to veterans, the military community, and their families. We felt as part of our mission to provide timely information to our member organization and others in the veteran space, that it was important to distribute key resources and information on Afghanistan. This webinar and others like it that we have presented are a key part of our mission to connect, collaborate, and communicate. We are particularly pleased to present this town hall, The Fallout from Afghanistan, How to Help Yourself and How to Help Others. We also we're appreciative of the time of our four panelists and the time they're giving us to address critical issues each day around the ending of the war and resettlement of tens of thousands of Afghan refugees. All four panelists have, once all four panelists have spoken, there will be time for questions to the panelists. And again, if you have questions, put it in the Q&A and we'll monitor that at the bottom of the screen. If your question is for a specific panel member, please put their name or the name of their agency with your question. At the end of the panelist presentations, we will ask the questions that have been entered in the box. We'll try and do that both in the first and second portion of this town hall. If we run out of time and you include your email address with your question, we will send you the answer. So we're committed to getting you the information that you're requesting. In addition, if you want your contact information shared with others after the meeting, everybody's doing that now. I love it. Good sharing of information. Please enter it into the chat box after the event. We will send out a list of attendees who give us their contact information in the chat box. Obviously, this meeting I'm going to record it. We will record this meeting and eventually we'll hang it on our website, dvvc.org, and other social media sites. So we have a Facebook, we have a LinkedIn, and we have dvvc.org. There are resource sheets that you can download during the webinar. We will put the links into the chat box. They will be Google links. If you can't access them, they're on the website, and we will also send them out in an email after this webinar. Thanks for being here, and let's get this show on the road. So we are honored to have in Susan DelMaestro, Ph.D., Director of Psychology, Internship, and Residency Training, Psychology Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder Clinical Team at the Michael J. Crescenz VA Medical Center, as our first presenter on what the PTSD clinical team is doing in response to Afghanistan and what they are seeing in terms of veterans' responses. Dr. DelMaestro has been a psychologist on the PTSD clinical team and trauma therapist for veterans since 1990. She is also the Director of Psychology Internship and Residency Training at the Crescenz VA. Our second presenter is Dr. Gregory Leskin. Dr. Leskin is a licensed clinical psychologist and serves as Director for Military and Veteran Family Program and the Academy on Child Traumatic Stress at the UCLA Duke University's National Center for Child Traumatic Stress. So, Dr. Leskin, thank you so much for getting up so early because you're on LA time and we appreciate that. He also directs the National Child Traumatic Stress Network Military and Veterans Family Program, providing education, training, and resources on military culture, screening, assessment, and evidence-based interventions to the military, through the VA, and the community-based behavioral health providers. Dr. Leskin will focus on the impact of the fallout from Afghanistan on children of veterans and Afghan refugees. So I will open the floor. Dr. DelMaestro, you're up first. Please tell us, we had an interesting conversation before we started. So like the 200% uptick in referrals. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm pleased to be here. Yes, I was mentioning that there is a 200% increase in the calls to our crisis center, to the National Crisis Center, since the events in Afghanistan that happened recently. I'd like to talk today to answer some of the questions that were posed to me. What are we seeing in veterans now coming in? What can family do? Some help when we're thinking about professionals and what they can do with veterans coming in now, and then also talk a little bit more specifically about the programming here at the Crescenz VA for veterans. So what we're seeing now, we're seeing a change in the mental health of veterans from all eras. So I am working with veterans from Afghanistan who served in Afghanistan, and they're, the idea that there's a change in how they saw their mission, purpose, and a sense of meaning being lost. Some quotes, one veteran who was doing some strategic bombing, I killed so many, for what purpose? Another veteran who was in Afghanistan who talked to some of the younger children and was talking about careers and as they form these relationships as civilians, saying, we gave hope to so many. And now that hope's not going to be realized. We're going to let them down. So there's a real a sense of there was this tremendous purpose, there was value, there was 20 years of this, and now feeling that they can't hold on to that anymore. In addition to that, some of them were saying, I buried 20 soldiers, their friends. Why did their friends die? What was the mission for? So there's a grief, but on a deeper level, there's also a painful reaction, and even a sense of shame, that this was not the outcome they wanted. And I think that moves to one of the concepts we see so often with PTSD, which is moral injury. And moral injury is, as veterans, you put your life on the line to do good. There's a mission, and overall that is the purpose and intent. And then when something changes, an outcome changes, it takes away that maybe what in your head is the justification or what you resonate with. And now you have to rethink your mission and rethink what you did and for what purpose. And so that's something we are working on all the time with veterans. And I think that can come from providers or from friends or from family members, to not invalidate the contributions that veterans have made, to be talking about their intent when at the time that they were in Afghanistan, to elevate lives, to protect women, to give opportunities to people. They're in tremendous courage, which we saw, and we saw till the very, very last day in Afghanistan. The ways in which you were helpful, and then to really emphasize that what's happening now is one moment in time. We don't know the long-term impact of the 20 years we've been in Afghanistan, and a generation that's had different opportunities. And so to always be reminding the veterans you work with of that, and the ways they've been helpful, and the ways it's been meaningful to them. We're, in addition to seeing, kind of that loss of purpose, we're seeing anger, often directed at the political administration, trying to always get beyond those feelings of anger to the loss and grief that's underneath, maybe a sense of betrayal, that there wasn't enough protection, worry about the Afghans who were there and the Americans who were there. And also sometimes you see a personal sense of safety has changed, where you might be thinking there's more danger. Well, are we watching terrorist organizations in the same way? Is there more danger? Is terrorism flourishing now? And so there's a concern about that. And what family members can do. The most important thing, I think, to communicate to veterans, I do this as a provider as well, is, I'm on your side. I don't understand. I want to understand. I don't understand because I have not lived this. I'm not in your shoes, but I'm concerned about you. I'm on your side. I want to listen and understand. And another important piece is that often veterans feel that some of what they've done is unforgivable. And so they might, and I've had many veterans over the years say to me, I'm a monster. I mean, this is, to put it very graphically, but these are the terms I've heard time and time again. And because of things that we ask our soldiers to do. This is something we ask of them, but they take this burden on themselves. And so we have to make sure we let them know we are sharing this with them. We do not see them that way. We do not see them differently. We do not see them as people who have made transgressions, but as people who have having tremendous courage to do something that our country has asked them to do. And so we emphasize that. For Vietnam veterans, we're seeing also an uptick in symptoms. We've had some Vietnam vets come in their 70s for the first time. The fall of Saigon is being triggered for them. There's distinct memories that are coming up. And also some of them in retirement now are having more time to look in the web, to search for people in their units. And so this is bringing up a lot of, painful memories. It can be great, it can be a way to reconnect, but it can also bring up painful memories. Veterans who find out their unit was, suffered tremendous losses after they came home. So we want to be aware of that. And know that they may need help now. This may be the time for them in their retirement to have delayed PTSD and to seek some help. So what are signs that someone needs professional help? All of these symptoms of PTSD or the symptoms of thinking more about Afghanistan, thinking about military service, that's normal. Having some grief, that's normal. Just like if we were suffering a tremendous loss or change in the mission or meaning of our life, we would have grief, we would have sadness, we might withdraw. It's if these symptoms are prolonged or they're severe, okay? If you're seeing people talk a lot about guilt or shame, you're seeing a lot of anger or some irrational behavior, isolation, or maybe a withdrawal from, providers. I'm not going to go to the VA, they don't help me, or I'm not going to go to my vet center group anymore. I don't want to talk to my old friends because they're going to ask me questions and I don't want to explain. If you're seeing withdrawal, you're seeing disconnection, you're seeing increase in drinking or the use of illegal drugs. If you're seeing extreme vigilance, now there's firearms that are accessible or unlocked. You're seeing people are on guard and they're not sleeping and there's real withdrawal. To be aware that, that these are signs. And I got some input from Coaching into Care, Dr. Tanya Hess, and she said what they're seeing, this is a family member's calling it. She's saying, you want to watch for isolation, for irritation that's extreme, for increase in drug use, drinking, if people are stopping medication, I'm not going to appointments. So that's something to look for. And of course, any mention of life is not worth living, I wish I didn't wake up, any preparations for any kind of suicidal behavior. So I see, I am almost out of time. I just want to say two other things. One is that as professionals, we have to be aware that this is also, and many of us who have worked with veterans, this is also our 20-year war. We are also in a way grieving as well. I had a deep sense of admiration for the soldiers that were there for the mission, and a deep sense of grief over what happened. And so to be aware that as we work with veterans, we're having our own reaction. We should be mindful. We should talk to each other so that we can, ask the questions as to with veterans we work with, what are your feelings that you're having as you watch this news on Afghanistan? What conversations are helpful? What's not helpful? Always moving toward the feelings instead of the politics. Looking for extreme thinking, everything I did was useless. Afghanistan, nothing I did made a difference. And looking for that extreme thinking and having them find meaning in what they did. They really put their life on the line to make Afghanistan safe for 20 years. And that's really needs to be noted. And to also just help them to continue to find meaning in their life now. The Crescenz VA, we are having drop-in groups. You can find them on the Facebook page and on their website. 3 times a week, Monday evenings, Wednesdays at 11 and Friday at 2. They're connect and share groups. They're for all veterans and all family members. It's for veterans to share, to learn about resources, to reach out to each other. But again, anyone can join. Coaching into Care and all the information's on the materials I sent. Any family member can call to find out how you get your veteran into care, how you say things to them like, I really care about you. Would you consider talking to someone? It takes a lot of courage. So those resources are available on our VA website. So, thank you.
Excellent, thank you. And I think what heightens some of the stress and trauma and anxiety is it's the 20th anniversary of 9/11. I mean, it even happened to me when I was watching some videos of the towers. I mean, my body, I mean, my stomach turned in knots, and I was like, that's what started it all, that. And so I have to think there must be some coincidence, as in they coincide of leaving Afghanistan and that trauma, and then seeing the thing that started it all. So Susan, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you
for that. So Dr. Leskin, I'm looking forward to hearing from you. It's kind of a different aspect of the impact on children of what's going on, both of Afghans and I don't know if you're going to get into this, but also is there an impact on kids of veterans and military family members? So Dr. Leskin, the floor is yours.
Absolutely. Thank you, Hugo, and thank you, Dr. DelMaestro, for a wonderful presentation, insight into the current mindset of many of our veterans. That was very helpful. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Gregory Leskin, and I serve as Director for the Military and Veteran Families Program at the UCLA Duke University National Center for Child Traumatic Stress. And we are the coordinating center for the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, or the NCTSN, and have the responsibility to provide leadership to this important collaborative network on a number of critical initiatives. Those include increasing our knowledge about the impact of trauma and loss on children and youth, developing evidence-based assessment and treatment for child traumatic stress and grief and loss. And we have focused a great deal of our attention to creating a better understanding of the behavioral health needs of children of veterans transitioning from military, as well as those children impacted by multiple moves and transitions, parental injury, and including death. NCTSN resources address understanding child trauma, prevention of suicidality and substance abuse, including in military and veteran children. And these resources are available in the resource box titled NCTSN Afghanistan Crisis. They could be found in the resource folder accompanying this webinar, as well as provide a number of NCTSN resources available to address trauma in children of veterans, including our fact sheet After Service Veteran Families in Transition are included to provide you with key information and cultural perspectives to understand the unique needs of children of veterans and find ways to provide mental health support during the immediate and long-term adjustment phases following military service, including ways to address grief and loss for those children who have lost a parent or significant other. Additionally, I'd like to focus today's presentation on resources available to address the acute needs of children recently resettling from Afghanistan. Individuals, children, and families can face complex transitional challenges when displacement occurs. Common issues include adapting to a new home, milieu, culture, language, environment, and learning new customs, while simultaneously maintaining family values and cultural traditions. For many who are displaced, trauma is central to their experience prior to, during, and post-displacement. Therefore, it is critically important when serving children and families who've been displaced that providers understand trauma, attachment issues, and their impact when designing programs and services that reflect the principles of trauma-informed care. Many of these children have experienced or witnessed stressful or traumatic event in their country of origin during and upon resettlement in the US as well. These experiences include separation from family and their support network, perhaps a lifetime exposure to war, also physical or sexual abuse, neglect, exploitation, coercion, injury or death of loved ones, food and housing insecurity, lack of education, physical exhaustion, and lack of proper medical care. In a study published in Child Abuse and Neglect in 2018, Leary et al. Interviewed 145 children, 104 parents living in Kabul, Turkam, and Jalabad. In this study, 71% of those children reported experiencing physical violence in some form in the previous year. Home was the most likely location of that violence. The overwhelming majority of parents reported using physical violence as a discipline method. In an abstract published in PLOS ONE 2019, 49% of boys and 43% of girls reported in Afghanistan having experienced more than one instance of violence victimization in the past month. 31% of the boys and 17% of girls disclosed perpetration of violence, more than one time of violence in the past month, with considerable overlap found between experience of victimization and perpetration, particularly among boys. For boys, food insecurity was associated with perpetration of peer violence, but not with victimization. And experiencing corporal punishment at school in the last month was significantly associated with both peer victimization and perpetration. For girls, food insecurity, more depressive symptom, and experiencing any beating at home was associated with both violence and victimization and perpetration. Okay, several recommendations to support our children who are here who have experienced displacement, disruptive attachment from parents or caregivers, trauma or loss or grief issues. Psychological first aid for unaccompanied minors is an adapted form of psychological first aid recently released and available through the NCTSN on our website with a focus on refugee children. PFA for refugee children includes a set of tools to assist staff and volunteers in supporting children through early transitions, including especially useful for working with children transitioning to an Office of Refugee Resettlement program or shelter, and also supports staff in caring for themselves while engaging in this type of challenging and meaningful work. This psychological first aid guides one through initial contact and engagement, including demonstrations of sincere respect and care, and the establishment of safety, making sure that first contact includes demonstration of warmth, respect, and caring in a non-threatening way. It may be important to display and communicate one's role as a helper to reduce anxiety. Every interaction will be an opportunity for healing and connection and safety. Tailor your interactions to the age of the child you encounter. For example, for young children, it is important to speak in simple terms, provide comfort like stuffed animals or other comforts for these young children, as well as help them to engage in play activities while you're speaking with them. Respect the children's experience of previous trauma and traumatic symptoms, including hypervigilance and watching out for danger. Provide children with many opportunities for moving, exercise, dancing, and singing to help reduce their stress. Help create daily routines of predictability as soon as possible. Finally, expect that some of these children are highly anxious, agitated, or withdrawn. These are common reactions to changes in their environment, multiple changes, including separations, sudden separations, and moves to a new country. Help children to stay calm by remaining calm yourself and present. Create and provide space for children who are not willing to talk, but also reassure them that you're available to discuss their frustrations, their sadness, loss, or despair. Additional key aspects of the psychological first aid approach include information gathering in order to meet their needs and help them provide practical assistance after identifying their list of needs, helping to prioritize and identify the most urgent and pressing for immediate action. Provide refugee children with information about coping. In addition to traumatic separation, most of these children will have been exposed to multiple and potentially complex traumas. Children can benefit from assistance, especially in the areas of sleep, eating, bodily pain, building trust, paying attention, and feeling emotionally overwhelmed emotionally and emotionally numb. Positive strategies to enhance coping include talking with a provider or peer for support, helping them to stay busy in activities, keeping to a schedule, allowing them to express themselves through artwork. Finally, This is challenging and meaningful work, which means that it can create stress for providers. Having a stress is enhancing mindset rather than a stress is debilitating mindset will help providers frame this experience positively, seeing the stress as motivating you to help others rather than harming you. Staff and volunteers who work with highly traumatized youth can benefit from using the PRN framework. P is pause to take 3 breaths and take time to consider how you are feeling. R is reset. Take a quiet moment and focus on something positive. And finally, N is nourish. Turn your focus towards something that helps you remember your own strength and resilience. Thank you very much for your time.
Dr. Leskin, thank you. One of the things that occurs to me, having served in Afghanistan, and you don't have to answer this now, but one thing that turns around in my mind is just the difference in culture. That's one thing, Afghan culture versus American culture. And then I think there are a lot of assumptions that the Afghans that came from Afghanistan have had a lot of contact with Americans. And I think that may be true for 1 or 2 people in a family, like the translator or interpreter, but not for the rest of the family. And so if you can think about, I mean, those are the things that kind of pop into my mind. If you can think about that when we get to question and answer. Some questions have come in for Susan, and I'm sure we'll get some for you too, Greg. So we have to transition now to the Afghan part. So now I get to introduce a buddy of mine. Eric Stetson is a fellow Army Lieutenant Colonel, retired Army Lieutenant Colonel. He is a leader in the Veteran Service Organization 4 Block that's very active in Philadelphia and across the country. And he also served in Afghanistan, and this is a very passionate thing for him as well. So that's why we wanted to bring Eric in. So Eric and Steve and Cathryn, if you can come up on camera, and Eric, the floor is yours.
Great. Hey, Hugo, thanks. And it's an honor and a privilege to be part of this and to volunteer with DVVC. And so I work with 4 Block, and we are in the mission of equipping high potential veterans to achieve the best possible careers at our nation's top companies. I also served in Iraq, but more importantly, we've got 2 great panelists who are going to give us some overview and some insight into how we can assist refugees and resettlement and integration into our population. I believe a critical mission for the United States at this point from a moral, ethical, and strategic perspective. So the first person I'm going to introduce, I'm pleased to introduce a gentleman named Steve Miska. He's a retired Army colonel. Infantry colonel. I used to work for him, full disclosure. He's an expert in soft network protection, and soft networks are the people that are in country who assist our military and government to work with the host nation population in the mission. So interpreters, contractors, etc. He's a former Army chair at the Marine Corps University and a former counterterrorism fellow at National Defense University. And Steve also serves as director for Iraq on the National Security Council in the White House. He serves on the steering committee for the Evacuate Our Allies Coalition, and is a broad coalition of veterans service organizations, humanitarian groups, and not-for-profits and others assisting in the Afghanistan evacuation. And he's going to give us an overview for national efforts to help Afghan resettlement in the U.S. to kind of set the overview stage for then what we're going to follow with what's happening closer to home here in the Philadelphia area. So Steve, if you can take it away.
Thanks, Eric, and thanks for having me, everyone. I'll explain the Evacuate Our Allies Coalition really briefly and what brought me to that to set the context for my comments. It's a broad coalition of not just humanitarian groups, but resettlement organizations. I see HIAS is represented here today. They're one of the 9 resettlement agencies. There are other nonprofits that have sprung up in the 2 decades of conflict that we've experienced that also serve to complement the resettlement agencies where the assistance that they're legally able to provide runs out. These nonprofits fill in, nonprofits like Miri's List and No One Left Behind, or a couple that come to mind in that space. But we also have others that do legal representation, for people being challenged with applying for visas, whether they're special immigrant visas, P2, P1, and the other forms of entry into the United States, like humanitarian parole. So, but I do want to note, because I'm sure we've got a lot of veterans out there in the audience, that what we also represent veteran service organizations and groups like Veterans for American Ideals, that's run out of Human Rights First, that has done a lot to help in Afghanistan itself. And many of you have probably read reports about what I would term rogue veteran operations that were going on around the periphery of the government evacuation. I can let you know, if you still have people that remain in Afghanistan, those operations have not ceased. There are dozens and dozens of organizations that are cooperating with our government, coordinating alongside the government. The government understands that the veteran community rose up in response to the withdrawal, basically to live out their ethos of leave no one behind, which is something inculcated in us in our time, during our time of service. So that means we don't stop. And our government recognizes that at the highest levels. Having served on the Obama administration, I know many of the key players in the Biden administration, and so we engage with them frequently to try to assist where we can. Evacuate Our Allies, where I am right now, is an operations center in downtown Los Angeles that has been running 24/7 for the last month as things grew to a head in Afghanistan. We expect to continue this operation in order to help organizations that are struggling with challenges, and they could be in Afghanistan proper, they could be in third country locations. Our government refers to the government coordinated locations as lily pads, or they could be in other third countries, because many of these veteran operations that raised millions of dollars, chartered commercial aircraft, flew them into Afghanistan, loaded up their Afghan colleagues, and then flew and coordinated all the overflight rights, the landing rights. They would fly them to a country like Uganda or Romania, which our government is not set up to receive and handle. So you've got a distribution of Afghan colleagues all across the world right now, and also in the United States at the 8 different military bases in the United States. I know Fort Dix is most close to this population that we're talking to here. And HIAS is one of the lead organizations there with supporting what's going on. So I just set the context to give you a sense for where we can provide assistance if you need to reach out to us. And I'm happy to provide the hotline to anybody interested. We field a lot of calls from all over the world in order to try to connect different organizations in the ecosystem to help them solve whatever the issues are, whether it's they need to get a safe house for somebody in Afghanistan, whether they've gotten people into Pakistan and now they can't get them out, or whatever the issue happens to be. If people are stuck on a military base in Qatar, for example, we engage there as well. In addition to working through our partners in the resettlement agencies and other partners like Team Rubicon, who can help address issues on some of the military bases here in the United States. I was really glad to hear discussion about moral injury from previous speakers. I will tell you, this has been more challenging for me personally than my combat deployments. It has been really difficult because there have not been a lot of good news stories, quite frankly. There was a lot of trauma. There still is a lot of trauma. And I think one of the things that our government is really moving forward on, with the VA in the lead, is engaging the veteran community to get involved with the reception of Afghan arrivals as they come to the United States. So it's really heartening for me to hear about efforts Eric was describing, where our our community is reaching out to help support Afghans as they arrive. There's a couple factors that have slowed down arrivals right now. Number one is flights have been canceled for about the next 2 weeks, incoming flights to the United States because of a measles outbreak and trying to contain that. So that has slowed arrivals. And then the other thing is for American citizens or legal permanent residents or special immigrant visa applicants, they have been able to get processed very quickly through the military bases, if they even had to go to the military bases. Other arrivals that are in humanitarian parole category have not been processed. There's the government agencies are still trying to get that procedure in place to make sure that when they do get to move on from the military bases, that they're afforded benefits that will help them with their resettlement. So there's a lot of challenges going on there. I did also appreciate Dr. DelMaestro's comment about this being a multi-generational thing in the veteran community. I have absolutely seen that. The VA has seen it as well, with Vietnam veterans not wanting to relive the trauma of the fall of Saigon twice in one lifetime. So we are connected in those circles as well, and I'm happy to share more on that in Q&A. I'll put the hotline number in the chat so we can share it. I see the questions coming in, and I will finish my comments there, Eric. Thanks.
Steve, thanks for putting that hotline number in the chat so folks can get involved, and just the overview, and thanks for what you and others have been doing for the past month plus. So we've got another panelist, as Steve referred to, our representative from HIAS, who's here with us today. And so it's my pleasure to introduce her so she can tell us closer to home what we're doing right here in the Philly and JBMDL area. Cathryn Miller-Wilson is the Executive Director for HIAS, Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, Pennsylvania, a graduate of Penn Law. She has spent her career in social justice work, representing parents of abuse and neglect, representing persons with HIV/AIDS at the AIDS Law Project of Pennsylvania, and teaching and supervising law students who represented low-income persons in a variety of civil matters. She's the primary author of Pennsylvania's Standby Guardianship Act, and has several publications on critical and current legal issues. Ms. Wilson will convey what HIAS, one of the two lead agencies in Philadelphia, is doing right now with the resettlement effort for Afghans, and in the process, how we can help HIAS and other organizations right here close to home with this mission. So Cathryn, thanks for joining us, and I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you so much, Eric. So just to be very, very clear, because it's important, I'm from HIAS, Pennsylvania, not HIAS. They're two different organizations. And so that helps me dive right into our talk. So HIAS Inc. is a national and international organization. It is, as Steve indicated, one of the 9 voluntary agencies that liaises with the State Department for purposes of refugee resettlement. HIAS Pennsylvania is an on-the-ground resettlement agency that is affiliated with HIAS Inc. for purposes of refugee resettlement only. In fact, we do a lot more than refugee resettlement. Refugee resettlement is one of our smallest programs. So that's an important distinction. And I put in the chat the web address for our website, which is not the same as HIAS Inc.'s. So I'm happy to talk about our efforts, and I'm really very flattered and pleased to be part of this panel. Obviously, hearing about the trauma from our soldiers is really critical to understanding how we do our work. So first, a short kind of tutor on how refugee resettlement works normally, and then what's different about the Afghan situation. So normally someone flees their country of origin because of persecution based on one of 5 reasons. That would be political or discrimination based on ethnicity, religion, nationality, or political beliefs. They flee to a third country. Once in a third country, they encounter hopefully an individual from the United Nations or the United Nations Human Rights Commission, and they tell their story. If their story aligns with the international definition of refugee, then they are declared to be a refugee, and there's a process to determine what should happen next. Is there any possibility of them returning home? If the answer is no, then there's a determination about which country they should be assigned to. And then once that's decided, they go through that country's security vetting process. The United States has the most rigorous security vetting process in the entire world. That has been true since post 9/11. It's an 8-step process. Each step along the way is time sensitive. So a very common thing that happens is that someone will be approved for the first 3 steps, 4 steps, and then in the next step, there's some delay, usually because of bureaucracy or short staffing. As a result of the delay, one of the earlier clearances might expire. If that happens, they have to go back to the beginning and start all over again. So we have resettled refugees that have been in camps for 20 years. We resettled a family where the parents were born in a refugee camp, raised in a refugee camp, met in a refugee camp, married, and arrived pregnant with their first child. So that's a very common experience. Once they arrive here, or once they get on the list that they're cleared for travel, the 9 agencies that Steve and I mentioned meet once a week, go over the list of people that are cleared for travel, divvy that up amongst themselves, and then they each take their own list and divvy it amongst their resettlement process partners across the United States. HIAS Inc. has 16 partners, of which HIAS Pennsylvania is one of them. So then we get assigned, we get an email saying a refugee is arriving in approximately 10 days. During the 10 days, we find them housing. Then we meet them at the airport, give them a hot meal, and install them in their first house in the United States. We then have 90 days to get them medical insurance, a social security card, a cultural orientation, intro to English language if they need it, employment assistance and introduction to our healthcare system, a checkup, get their kids enrolled in school, talk to them about how our education system works. And hopefully by the end of that 90 days, they are earning an income and self-sufficient, at which point we tell them good luck. Call us in a year because they will need more legal processing at that point. For our clients, 85% are self-sufficient at the 90-day mark. The 15% that aren't, we then try to enroll in what we call post-resettlement programs to try to provide them with more intensive services so that they can meet that self-sufficiency mark. So that's refugee resettlement in a nutshell. It's been that way since passage of the Refugee Resettlement Act in 1980. In Afghanistan, what's happening and what's happened is the crisis has meant that there isn't time, nor has there been ability for people to flee. Some people already had pending special immigrant visa applications. Those folks have been sent to the military bases, as we've said, so that they can finish the processing of those applications. Once they get the application, then they get sent to one of the resettlement partners across the country. Some of them will be coming to us. But a lot of people had no pending applications and had no time. So the government gave them what's called humanitarian parole, which is not in fact a legal status. It's a stamp that allows people to come into the United States. They then got sent to the military bases for processing, which would mean security, vetting, as well as health. So things like measles, COVID, all of that stuff. They are trying to get that processing done in an expedited way in 30 days. And once that is done, then those folks are being sent to resettlement agencies like ours. The problem is that those folks having no legal status are not eligible for Medicaid. will have to file for asylum, which HIAS PA has a very robust immigration legal services program. We're the largest immigration legal services provider in the state. So we are prepared to help those folks file for asylum, but the asylum process takes years. And so during those years, they're in a bit of a limbo. We have heard that there are attempts to try to expedite work authorization, but it's not clear that that will work. And so we are extraordinarily concerned about this group of folks who will neither have work authorization and therefore no ability to earn an income, and how they're going to support themselves. So we've been working with the other Philadelphia Resettlement Agency, Nationality Services Center. We're having a meeting of landlords. We're having meetings with employers. We're having meetings with donors. With the donors, we're asking people to give us sufficient money so that we can give a stipend beyond the 90-day stipend that is given by the federal government. Because again, if these folks don't have work authorization after that 90-day stipend dries up, it's unclear what they're expected to do. And we certainly don't want a number of traumatized Afghans in our community without any ability to support themselves or have housing. So those are the things that we're doing and that we're facing. We have committed thus far to resettle 100 Afghans over and above the 250 refugees from other countries that we've already committed to resettle. Nationality Services Center, which has a larger resettlement program than we do, has committed to serve 200 Afghans over and above the 300 refugees that they will be resettling. So that's pretty much the status. In terms of ways to help, you can go to our website, which I put in the chat. And I think that there's a link in some of the materials that have been passed around that is a link to the page that we have created that we're keeping constantly updated regarding the Afghan crisis. We are also trying to file a number of humanitarian parole petitions ourselves, because there are still so many Afghans that have been left behind. Afghans can self-petition, but obviously they're stuck in Afghanistan. So it requires like Facebook messaging back and forth to get all those petitions. We have trained 600 lawyers who have stepped forward to try to provide pro bono services, but we don't have the capacity to mentor all 600 of them. So we're trying to do it about 50 at a time. And then a sidebar that's really important to know is that we have an immigrant youth program where we staff a shelter that's federally funded for unaccompanied minors. Those generally have been Central American kids, but 2 weeks ago, 5 Afghan children showed up in the shelter. So we're working, and we're anticipating receiving many more of these children. Some of them were thrust onto the planes in the chaos by their parents. Yeah. Some of them witnessed violence by their parents. And so there's kind of all ends. Yeah.
So Cathryn, I apologize for interrupting, because we want to keep on this and get some questions in, but I'm going to turn it back to Hugo, who's got a question or two for one of the other professionals before they have to cut out. Hugo.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you, Steve and Cathryn. Real quick, Susan has to leave just before noon, but one of the questions that came in on chat is that there are a lot of veterans within the VA, and so is there, I mean, we're talking about veterans that are kind of outside the VA medical system. They don't work within the VA. What kind of support is there for veterans that work within the VA system that are probably having some of these same conflicting thoughts about Afghanistan that veterans like me and Eric and Steve outside are having? Is there any thought to that, or anything specific that we're doing for veteran employees of the VA?
That's a great question. Within all of our behavioral health meetings, we're talking always about this this issue and how it feels for our staff, and we're honoring that the service of the veterans that work among us. And I would say outside of behavioral health, I don't know what other services are doing. A lot of our like chaplain service and even behavioral health service and our PTSD team, we work also with veterans who are employees as well. So if they feel comfortable with that, they can come to the VA. They can also go to the vet centers. There's also the outstanding Cohen Clinic where they can seek services. So I would say there's both inside the VA and outside great services available to them. Mindful of this, but I would not say I know of specific things that we're doing right now for our employees.
Yeah, and Council for Relationships, I would throw that out there as well as a mental health provider. Yeah, I mean, the basic question is who takes care of the people that are taking care of veterans? Just kind of the overall question. So I think unless somebody can pop something in the chat immediately for questions for Dr. DelMaestro or Dr. Leskin, I know, Susan, you need to leave momentarily. Certainly, if anybody has a question after Susan leaves, we'll get that to her and we'll get it answered. Dr. Leskin, is there anything specific about, so Cathryn talked about kind of the specific situation with Afghans and their resettlement and how it's different than the normal process. How does that impact kids? Is there specific issues that we need to consider with taking care of children during this time?
Thanks, Hugo. I think that I touched on a few main points. I wanted to focus in on, well, we talked about complex trauma backgrounds, the displacement process and the settlement process. Each represents potential stress, including separation from family. In some cases, like Cathryn was just bringing up, that some of the children are coming unaccompanied. So to your earlier point, there is a need to attend to a multitude of factors, including culture, language, an understanding of previous trauma, the child's experience, the child's age, an understanding of their experience. I presented a framework that is fairly well known in terms of psychological first aid that provides a frame to structure some of the initial contact engagement with children and families. I think that the major goals would be to provide that child and the family a sense of safety, a sense of understanding in terms that are easily understood. So that includes maybe use of peers or spiritual leaders or others in the community who are trusted. And our goals are to create a safe and non-traumatizing environment for the children to start to develop some structure, some routine. And I think the longer term goals are connecting links to services in the community, continue to provide a safe environment, and allow the children opportunity to create longer term structure and get plugged into mental health services, but also regular routine, including school or childcare services. So that's how I'm envisioning, Hugo, a really positive frame on the initial recovery and transitional phase.
Cool, thank you. And I'll pass it to Eric, but before I do, just Cathryn, I noticed your comment there. So considering the unique situation of Afghan refugees, is school a possibility? Like, is there that kind of stability, something that an organization like yours can create, either on somebody at Dix or even outside? So Eric, I'll pass it to you.
Okay, thanks, Hugo. So did we want to get an answer to that point, Hugo, first, or? Okay. Well, let me drive on with another question that I have here that came in the question box. What guidance would you give to families in Afghanistan who want to pursue an SIV or P2, but have not yet had the chance, and 2 are currently moving among safe houses and attempting to find chartered planes. And so I'll throw that to Steve first, and then maybe Cathryn can follow on.
Sure, and I would just like to, that question to Cathryn, we're even the success stories when a family gets here, they're coming in and they're grateful to be here, but their 21 and 22-year-old sons are back in Afghanistan and we're not allowed to come with them. So there's like degrees of trauma in every single case coming in, just to flag that. And I know people on the reception side are very well aware. So in Afghanistan itself, it's very challenging right now. So the first thing is what a lot of the organizations focused on evacuation or safe passage, as we're calling it now, have been advising is digital hygiene. Basically, the first thing that will happen when the Taliban detain you is they will force you to open your phone and they will search your Facebook profiles, your Google searches, any of that sort of stuff to identify Western affiliations. And so Human Rights First has on their website, and I can drop a link in the chat, a digital hygiene kit to help Afghans clean up their profiles in a way that will help mask their identities to certain individuals. The other challenge is that whether or not they have a passport or visa is a big deal now that commercial air is starting to return, international commercial air. It's very limited right now, and it's only limited to foreign passport holders, not to Afghans. But we expect at some point that'll start resuming, and we're trying to figure out what does normal look like for commercial air under the Taliban. And that's yet to be seen. But it's a big difference if you need to go to a Taliban-controlled ministry to get a passport or a visa and get screened there, potentially with biometrics. That's a level of risk that's different than for somebody who already has a visa. One of the things we're seeing is India has an emergency visa right now that people have been applying for, and that allows them to potentially get out of the country if there's a place that can receive them in India. It's a temporary measure to get them out of harm's way that then allows them to do something like apply for an SIV or a P2 visa. So there aren't a lot of good options though. And what I would tell you is just from our perspective in the operations center here, we go by 2 fundamental principles, and that's empathy. When somebody answers the phone, they're answering it from a place of seeking understanding, because we know there's just a huge amount of distress, whether it's an Afghan family directly or whether it's a US citizen concerned about an Afghan family and trying to help them any way they can. And then the second guiding principle is humility. And I know the operators on the call will absolutely get this. As somebody who spent 40 months in combat, I find it insane that me from 9,000 miles away am going to tell a family what they should do in Afghanistan. And so we don't give them direct advice. What we do is we give them the best information we currently have so that they can weigh the risks themselves and make their own decisions. And we can just let them know about resources that are available. But the short answer is there are not a lot of good questions or good answers. And I would recommend they seek out an organization like IRAP, the International Refugee Assistance Project, where you've got just top-rate lawyers who can assist in a pro bono capacity to apply for visas.
Thanks, Steve. It makes a lot of sense. And you talk about biometric screening, and I was part of that. So it's particularly infuriating to me to realize my work might be used against our allies right now. So when you talk about the moral injury and the frustration, it just compounds. So anyhow, I want to go back to Cathryn. So let's focus for a second on immediate needs, because I just heard we're going to have about 300 families adopted into this geographical area total. We're working with over 100 right now at JBMDL, and I know some supplies have come in. So what can this group of people do right now in this area to support HIAS or NSC and JBMDL for right now to help these Afghans?
So we're asking for basically 4 things. First one is obviously money, but just to clarify on the money front, we get a lot of heavily restricted money from the government. And they're really restrictive. You can't spend this on this category of individual. You can only spend this on this category. And this, comes right down to what Steve was saying about the families. We have, we'll have a family of SIV, but SIV only helps minor children. So the 21-year-old, you're not allowed to spend the federal money on helping the 21-year-olds get out of Afghanistan, which is ridiculous. So that's why we need money. The second thing is landlords. And there was a question in the Q&A that I want to kind of address about housing. A lot of people, very generous people, have stepped forward offering their homes, and we're really grateful. But there's 2 problems. One is Afghan families tend to be really large. So 1 or 2 bedrooms isn't going to cut it. But the second one is the trauma of displacement, which is true for every refugee, but kind of multiply it by 30, given the speed of how events have happened for Afghans. We have tried to work with individual private homeowners in the past when situations have come up, and it's just been really a failure. Not to dampen the generosity, but cultural difference is a real thing. So is cultural humility. So is trauma, and so you really can't kind of open your hearts and home without expecting people to live by your rules. It's normal, but it's not really feasible for a new arrival who has their own rules and their own way of doing things and their own trauma that they're processing. So we're asking for people with empty properties, to please step up as much as you can. And even more than stepping up, the need for affordable. The market has really taken an upswing, surprisingly, post-pandemic, and landlords have waiting lists, 10, 15 people long for really high rents. So then saying, well, so this person has a federal stipend of $1,200 for, an 8-bedroom house. It's not really, not really top of the list. So we're asking landlords whether we can find some way to subsidize people, temporarily at least, something like that. Similarly, because of the high volume and suddenness, we're asking for hotels and Airbnbs. Airbnb has set up a portal on their website for people who are willing to donate their home for temporary 10-day stays. Those 10-day stays that are free are critical because they allow us to find affordable housing. And during that whole 10 days, the Afghan doesn't have to dip into their federal government money. So that's a major savings. Hotels have stepped up and have offered heavily discounted rooms, which we're really grateful for temporary 10-day stays. The discounts are heavy. They're about $89 a month, which is terrific. But again, that either is coming from the stipend or from our agencies. So money, money, money. The third thing that we're looking for is employers who are willing to brainstorm with us. We're going to hold a forum probably in October. So look out for that, because the people are going to need training. The SIVs are, for the most part, fluent in English and educated, but their spouses are not. And the humanitarian parolees are not. So we're going to try to work with them to provide kind of ESL and on the job. Like, there was a lot of talk because of the pandemic about the 4-day work week. What we would love to see is something like a 6-hour day where 2 hours are spent on English, 6 hours of work and 2 hours of English language learning for an 8-hour day, so that folks can kind of learn on the job and be employed and be able to sustain their family. So those are the things we're looking for. Again, the webpage, which is in the chat and in the materials, if you're willing to just keep looking at that, we're keeping it updated and there's constantly evolving needs. So,
Yeah. And
thank you.
Cathryn, if I can follow on with that, right now we've seen messages where JBMDL had shut down the donation of goods periodically, and then it was back open. And, what's our status today? Is JBMDL ready to receive the kits that are described on the HIAS and NSC sites?
Yeah, so NSC is providing kits. We welcome in-kind donations of goods, but it's a very specific list of what we welcome on our website. And the reason for that is having the capacity to sort through and distribute, right? If it's not on the list, don't give it to us because we can't handle it. And one thing, NSCN, we work with a nonprofit called the Furniture Bank. So those willing to donate furniture, the Furniture Bank accepts donations, and then we use those donations to furnish houses. So
Great. I have some in my garage. Now I know where it's going. Okay.
Yeah.
So another question with the Afghans is, how many Afghan refugees coming here already have family members in the United States who are going to be able to adopt them or sponsor them? Do we have a feel for that yet?
So I can't tell you national numbers. Philadelphia has about 200 person Afghan community. And they all have family ties. Again, what I put in the chat about this family connection. So our office manager is an Afghan SIV that we resettled in 2019. He was actually on the front page of the Inquirer today. He himself has 5 minor children. They all got here in 2019. He's currently sponsoring a cousin and his cousin's family. His brother made it over, but his brother's wife and kids didn't make it over. We're trying to help them. And that's a very common situation. So of the 200 Afghans that are here, likely they each have, 50 or 60 relatives that they're trying to get over. And that's another thing, just in terms of helping the filing fees. Filing fees for humanitarian parole, we're trying to get the feds to waive them, but until they do, we're paying for them. So we have a fund set up for that. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I appreciate the clarification. And just, I think a point that comes up again and again here is that understanding, wanting to support and help, the best way to do it is through an existing refugee relief and resettlement organization who has the experience with the cultural challenges and the difficulties of sponsoring, and can tell you the multiple ways you can sponsor an Afghan or a family of Afghans back here in the United States, because it is tricky. And we have heard the horror stories of those attempts gone wrong for significant cultural differences. Don't you kind of look before you leap, talk to the experts to help them help you be most effective with your skills, your money, your goods, etc. that you're gonna share. Steve, you want to dovetail on that at all from your perspective? Anything you've seen?
We can't get good answers at the national level, and so there's really not a lot. What I can tell you is there are 40,000 people on the bases in the US right now that are kind of stalled, and there are tens of thousands others out there in the lily pads, and then there are possibly an order of magnitude more inside of Afghanistan.
So what this means is this is going to be an ongoing situation that we're going to be working through for, well over a year. So we as leaders in different organizations can start to think about how we're going to strategically attack this into the new year. So there's short-term needs that we can help with, and then there's long-term thinking about how we can work towards the integration and resettlement of these folks. And so I think we got to think for all the veterans in terms of the 50, the 200, and the 300 meter targets for this, I think a critical and strategic operation working to support our Afghans. So I'm checking for other questions that have come in, and Hugo or anybody else jump in if I missed one.
I think we're good.
Okay.
I will tell you what I have found somewhat frustrating about this whole process is there's no overarching government agency that's responsible for this. And so, Steve, you just kind of mentioned it, that we think these are the numbers, and the process for, I have a friend who works for FEMA, which is a component of DHS, and he is actually running operations at Philadelphia Airport. When Afghans come in, then they get onward movement to other places, one of them being Joint Base MDL, but I mean, I hear about Camp Atterbury in Indiana, and I mean, a whole bunch of different places. And then it falls on organizations like yours, Cathryn, right, at the local level that deal with this. It is frustrating to me that there isn't this kind of overarching framework for how to handle this. But I mean, it is what it is, so we deal with what we got. So Cathryn, it sounds to me like you said the 4 things that we can do immediately. And it sounds to me like your advice is constantly check the website for updates and what has to happen. And Eric, you kind of said, you know, for the next year. I think this is a couple of years at least. I don't know if that's a realistic timeline. And I think things will constantly. What I've discovered is this is a very fluid environment. Not only what's happening in Afghanistan, what's happening here, what's happening at the bases, and then what's going to happen out in the community. So I think we're going to tie it up. Are there any last questions that anybody has?
Okay, so I know that we've put portions of the chat are going to be shared with the websites and links and contact information for some of our people that have joined us. And I know that we've been referred back to that website, the HIAS website, and others for checking on the immediate needs to know in the ballpark what we're going to try and organize to, you know, for the near term. And then Hugo, if I just throw out there real fast, you know, a couple of takeaways for me, you know, as a veteran, as someone who works in the veteran space, you know, from listening to our mental health professionals, the veteran to veteran network is powerful and important. So buddy checks, battle check, you know, your battle buddies, check on other veterans, see how they're doing. It's an emotional, traumatic time, and people are angry and frustrated. And so we got to take care of each other. Work through HIAS and NSC in conjunction with JBMDL for the immediate focus of effort here in the Philly area. We got about 300 families coming in total to the area at the end of the day as projected right now, but you said it's fluid. It's an ongoing mission to get them out, as Steve has pointed out. So you now have seen a face and a name that's been involved in that. And so if you're interested and you've got unusual resources, or et cetera, you know, reach out to Steve and his organization. And then something that both our mental health providers and Steve referred to is us operating with empathy and humility in how we go about what we do in this space, because it's tricky and it's challenging. But if we do that right, we're going to make a significant difference. That's all for me, Hugo.
Awesome. So I'm gonna close up. Eric, thank you very much. Cathryn, Greg, Steve, and I know that Susan had to leave. Thank you very much. I will tell you from a DVVC perspective, this is not the end of the conversation. This is just kind of the start of it. And we may ask our panelists to come back again as conditions change. You know, we said this is a fluid environment. We may come back to you again and say, hey, what's up now? I mean, how can we help now? And one of the things that popped into my mind, and I can understand why we want to be protective, but of connecting with the Afghan community in Philadelphia might also be a way. Obviously, we have to be pretty measured in that as well. So thank you, Eric, for moderating. Thank you to our guests. We've shared a lot of information today. A lot of this will be on dvvc.org. If you want to save the chat, some of you, I think, it doesn't sound like all of you, have little down at the bottom of the chat box. There are 3 little dots, and you can save the chat to your computer. And again, dvvc.org is where to find all this information. We'll post it on the YouTube channel, and we'll also have links on Facebook and LinkedIn. Our fall meeting is on October 15th from 8:45 to 10:30 a.m. That will still be virtual. We're going to vote for a partial slate of Delaware Valley Veterans Consortium officers. And we will have a presentation from Drexel, UPenn, the VA Medical Center, and a filmmaker named Nicole Emilio Casper. And we're going to talk about complementary alternative medicine. If you haven't joined DVVC, please do. There's no cost. Just go to our website, dvvc.org, and there's different levels. Companies can join, but our main focus is on veteran service organizations. And check out It's been a long time coming, this DVVC.org, so we're pretty proud of it, and it's still a work in progress. Thank you for joining us, and I hope everybody found this informative. I think the key element here is this is not the end-all be-all. This is just kind of the start of how we help our Afghan allies that are coming into the United States. So thank you very much, and have a great day.